Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/prorevenge. In today's episode, manager bullies me for several months until I finally quit. I made sure to get him fired after that. Don't fire the guy who holds the patents. Finally, my mom is so petty she got revenge against a 10-year-old kid. Before we get into today's episode, remember to subscribe so you never miss another of our videos. Manager bullies me for several months until I finally quit. I made sure to get him fired. This happened around 2016. I'd, at the time 25-26 male, been without a job for a while, looking for a better paying job than I had before, and I found one at a camera security company that was looking to hire someone for the service desk. I went for an interview and got a call back later that day. If I wanted the job, it was mine. Now, my new manager was an ex-military. Specifically ex-army, not American, just pointing that out. He really didn't like having people disagree with or going against him. A thing I was very unaware of when I took the job. For 2 or 3 months everything was going well. The manager was cordial and seemed to really enjoy having me there. I worked my butt off every day, as the software we were working with was unknown to me. So I studied a lot and even went overseas to another country to follow a course and succeeded on my exams. However, after that period my grandpa, who was like a second father to me, suddenly was hospitalized after a brain bleed aneurysm. He was found in the shower. He had collapsed after he pressed his panic button. Assisted living? Not sure how it's called in English, apologies. This all happened on a Wednesday. The family came together in the hospital several times to show support and see grandpa. However, on Friday afternoon, 3 p.m. I was called up by my father, my grandpa's son, while I was at work, and he explained to me that grandpa unfortunately passed away. I was in tears on the phone and in utter shock. It took me a while to calm down. I went to my manager and explained what just happened and that I'm going home to be with my family. However, that day there was an event. The company was doing a charity event, and this charity was going to be public news. They already announced the amount of people participating, and it would look bad if there were a person down. It was basically just for good public records. So he refused to let me go. I told him that by law he cannot deny me, as my contract states I can take a day for a death in the family, and that I was leaving now. This was the turning point. He went from a nice manager to a manager from hell. Suddenly everything I did was wrong. I was told he couldn't believe I was in this line of work for 6 years and be this bad at my job. He cussed me out and ridiculed me in front of my colleagues and even clients. This all continued for several months and severely began to impact my mental health. I had a talk with my parents and my fiancée, at the time still my girlfriend. I'd asked her to marry me in December 2016, and they basically told me that this was not okay, that I didn't have to take this and that I should give them my 2 weeks notice. I agreed. The following day I went to HR and explained why I was leaving the company and that I couldn't stand the idea of working even a single day more with that excuse of a human being. HR showed interest in my well-being and, even more importantly, in what I was claiming about my manager. They had received more complaints about him, but nobody had proof of his wrongdoings. So, they asked me if I had proof. I told them I'd be looking for a new job, but I'd gladly fit in the time to collect all I could. For the next 2 weeks I collected everything. Memos, emails, voice recordings. When on the phone the calls are automatically recorded, and the dumbass was stupid enough to cuss me out while I was on the phone. Lucky me. Also lucky was that my colleagues at the desk had my back this entire time. They'd been trying to cheer me up, said I was doing fine work, and that they also didn't understand this man's behavior. So, when I came by and asked if they'd mind signing a document that everything I stated in the paperwork was the true, they gladly did. I had one last talk with HR and him at the same time the last day I was there. Before he even walked in, I told the HR person who was mediating, he's going to walk in, say what he wants to say, and I'll be quiet and listen. When he's done, I'll explain my side and he's going to interrupt me, tell you I'm lying, and talk about completely unrelated subject matter to drag the conversation another direction. She looked surprised at my comment, but had no time to respond as Mr. Army Man walked in and began his spiel. Exactly as I stated, he'd blurt his side out, and once I tried to talk he'd consistently interrupt me and tried to pick fights. Eventually I got up, told HR I told you so. Here's the documents you've been asking for. I placed a filled folder with several dozens of emails, plenty of memos and a USB containing 3 phone conversations and even video footage of him yelling at me. In both voice and video recordings you could easily hear him cuss me out. I gave the manager a big bright smile, who was smirking victoriously, and said to him, "I don't think you'll be smirking like that for long. Enjoy your little victory." His smirk disappeared into a confused scowl, but I slammed the door on him before he could respond and left the building feeling like a huge, and I mean humongous-sized, planet-sized amount of stress fell off my shoulders. Within a month, I was back to my old self. 2 months later I was working at a new job, and out of curiosity I checked my ex-manager's LinkedIn. Unemployed. I called one of my old colleagues to ask what exactly went down. My proof opened Pandora's box. He was being disrespectful to the female staff, insulted the older staff, and on multiple occasions was less than cordial with our external hires. None of these complaints were acted upon, because it was his word against theirs and there was no proof. However, me providing overwhelming proof of his gross behavior towards me made all other complaints now to be taken as fact. He was promptly fired less than a month after I left, and they refused to provide him with any form of reference. In a field like his, references mean a lot. So not getting one from a company you worked at for nearly a year is a huge red flag. It's now 2020, 4 years passed, and according to LinkedIn he's still not working in his field. I'll gladly admit that I felt rather wickedly satisfied, and still do whenever I happen to think about it. Satisfied and still. Don't fire the guy who holds the patents. So, some context. My father had a degree in mechanical engineering. Either a master's, or doctorate. It had taken him years to get, and he was very proud of that. Thanks to his training, he had found his way working for many well-known companies, working primarily with the procedures used to make various things. Over time, he'd privately began working on an idea that would revolutionize how school and gym lockers worked. See, my father realized that there was a problem with those type of metal lockers. Namely, it was very easy for a person to break into them. What's more, as the lockers were designed, there were multiple exposed moving parts, which meant that if a student put too many books in one, or really anything got against the door, the locker could be jammed shut, making it near on impossible to open. So, for several years, Dad toyed with a number of ideas, before hitting on a new design which would solve all those problems. The inner workings of the locker's locking mechanism would be contained within the door in such a way that 1. It was impossible for someone to shim or break into, 2. The entire mechanism would be enclosed, and 3. It was relatively maintenance-free. Now, at this point, my father was the vice president of manufacturing, and apparently there wasn't a clause in his contract that said that if he designed anything while working for the company, then he had to turn that over to them for profit. Dad still approached the company, offering them the design, but they weren't interested. Dad sat on the design for a while before eventually just taking out several patents on them, and then forgetting about them. About 6 months after his first attempt at getting the company interested, the parent company's owner chairman of the board passed away, and the board opted to sell off some of the holdings. The company my dad worked for was part of that. The new owners were young guys who seemed to think they knew everything, as young business owners always seem to think, and they set about changing 99% of the way things were being done. At some point, they stumbled across the plans my father had designed. Now that's where things turned curious. They really wanted to start producing this new design, but as they didn't have all the plans and processes laid out for them, they had to turn to my father for answers. Rather than asking him how to do it, or licensing the patents, as any reputable company would have done, they ordered him to turn over all his work, or else they would fire him. Dad stood his ground and refused. The new owners and my father went back and forth, arguing over details for several weeks, before finally the new owners fired my father for insubordination. So, on to the revenge. There may be more to this, but I'm not entirely sure if it is just pro-revenge. It could border on nuclear, based on what happened some years later, though I'm not certain that what later happened had anything to do with my father's actions. So, after cleaning out his office, and packing things in the trunk of his car, my father headed home and made a few phone calls. He must have gone through 8 or 9 different calls before he got in touch with someone who was interested in what he had to say. See, my dad was under no illusions that the company that had fired him wasn't going to just make those patented lockers on their own. He also knew that though the company itself was relatively small, the owners had money and there was no way he could fight them. However, a larger company could. So he contacted the major competitors and made them an offer. He eventually set up a meeting with some people, wheeled out the prototype he'd made, explained how everything worked and noted that with this system the company could revolutionize the way lockers were both designed, and improve both safety and security. What's more, as he was the only patent holder, for the next 7 years or so, that company could be the only company to produce them. The competitor jumped at the chance and bought all patents both for the design, and the process. They even paid my dad a substantial consultancy fee to go out to their manufacturing site and teach their crews how to make the needed tool and die sets to produce them. Less than 6 months after the first company had fired him, their number one competitor was completely destroying them in the market with this new design, and there wasn't a damn thing the first company could do about it. They did try suing my father, claiming he had stolen their intellectual property, but that case quickly evaporated when they had to admit under oath that they'd never actually signed a contract with him, and there was no requirement that he turn over anything he created to the company. In the 7 years from when the second company bought the locker design and process patents, they pretty handily moved into markets that previously they'd been unable to. The first company soldiered on, but by the time the patent had finally expired, they were a shadow of their former selves. The new owners had sold the company at a loss, with the competitor buying it, only to shut that production facility down due to redundancy. Put maybe 200 people out of work, though given how they'd lost so much business, I wager that it was far less than that. So yeah, the new guys don't want to play ball, threaten the guy that holds the patents on something they want to do, and then fire him, only to have him take everything to their competitor and effectively put them out of business. My mom is so petty she got revenge against a 10-year-old kid. I was a new kid in a prestigious private school. We were in 4th grade, and the popular kid had just transferred out of the school. It meant that she left behind a horde of boys who had crushes on her. Apparently, I looked like her. Splitting image. I have never met her, so I was pretty much clueless about all of this. But the boys, as well as the girls, became extra nice to me as a result. Now, I was pretty nervous the first few months. These were really rich children, and the only reason I got in was because of a scholarship. TV told me rich kids bullied the nerds. But nope, everyone was nice. Got good friends. Got into the honors list. Everything was swell. Except one day, I get a letter in class. It started with a "Dear," my name, then, it proceeded to tell me I was the worst thing to happen to this school. It told me I was just a pretender pretending to be nice, pretending to be smart, etc. What nerve I had to act so cute and friendly when I was really just ugly outside and inside. I'm not allowed to eat at our class table anymore because no one wants me there. Standard stuff, really. It was signed by all the girls in my class, but I suspected it was really only written by one person. Let's call her Sarah. Obviously, 9-year-old me was devastated. But I crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. I see Sarah whisper something to one of our classmates. My classmate walks to the trash can, gets the letter and returns it to me, saying, "Sarah says you can't throw this away." Fine. I put it in my pocket. The next day, Sarah somehow got the entire class to ignore me. No one talked to me during the morning classes. At lunch, as I was walking to our class table, each class had one long table to eat on. In the cafeteria, she blocked my way and said I didn't belong there. So, I made my way to one of the unused tables to eat. Luckily, one of my classmates saw this, felt sorry for me, and then decided to eat with me instead. I heard my name being called and I looked to see my mother in the cafeteria entrance, holding a fast food bag. She told me she was there to bring my lunch, which didn't make sense because I was holding the packed lunch she prepared. I looked inside the bag. It seemed as though she bought every single thing off the menu for me: a cheeseburger, spaghetti, fries, fried chicken. My classmates were looking on in interest. My mom turns to them and smiles. She tells them she has a surprise for them. She goes outside and returns with a box of ice cream cups. She distributes them, but doesn't give one to Sarah. Everyone's happily eating their ice cream, including me, when my mom turns to Sarah and says, "Bullies don't get ice cream." Apparently, she found the letter in my pocket while doing laundry. If you made it to the end, thanks for watching. Please remember to show your support and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next video.